News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis. Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
Welcome to Tool Talk Radio, coming to you from the Brown Refrigeration Studios. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning.
I'm Allan Gilbreth with darkoakmedia.com.
And I'm Maximilian, wishing a happy birthday this week to the legendary Michelangelo.
Oh, wow. Holy cow. How old would he be today? I mean, I guess we don't talk about age at that
How
point,
old would
right?
he be? He'd be dead.
Yeah.
Well,
He's dead years old.
Well, that's okay. Joe's going to get excited when the other three turtles have birthdays.
Yeah. Max, that's you're a young man. I know you've never been to Italy. Have you ever been to Italy, Allan?
No.
Okay. No. Well, I have. I was lucky
Yes.
enough as a kid to go to Rome, and I saw Michelangelo's work in person. I saw that the famous statue of Moses, and then the Pieta. And you look at those things, and you really can't believe it's made of stone. I mean, it looks like it looks like a person.
Are you waiting for them to come to life like Night at the Museum?
It's like that, man. I mean, the detail. That guy was a genius. I mean,
you look at some of these artists back in time, and then the biggest thing to remember is that they didn't have power tools.
I was about to say, look at the tools they were working.
They were.
with, so
I mean, you look at they're like, and this is so and so's tools that we found, after they died. And you look at this, and you're like going,
yeah.
all right, A, I have all the same tools. B, there is no way I am ever going to make that happen.
Yeah,
right.
Pretty fascinating. Well, that was a good one, Max. I appreciate that, Matt. That's worth a deep dive at some point. So I'm sure we could connect sculpture and maybe painting and everything with home improvement. We'll find a way.
Drastically, easily.
Yep. But if you want to weigh in and let us know what you think, let us know how you celebrated Michelangelo's birthday. You can get in touch with us at the Big M Roofing and Remodeling Hotline at 901-683-0989. And we also invite you to go to Tool Talk Radio's Facebook page. And if you do, Allan, anybody that went to Tool Talk Radio's Facebook page this morning, which I know some of our friends have, Abigail, literally, I made a post, and within 5 seconds, she gave it a like. So, Abigail, we don't give you enough shout-outs, but we'd love it if you texted in some more questions. We like that, too.
Absolutely.
However, they're gonna see a video that I posted, and I guarantee some of them are going to be rolling their eyes because in great moments in building history, I finally made it happen. I twisted Allan and Max's arms, and I said, doggone it, we are going to celebrate one of my favorite structures in the world, the legendary Wrigley Field. And
I really can't argue with you. Legendary is a good word for it.
And I was able to persuade Max because Max is a philosophical soul. And Max, you saw some connections right away with a topic you're very fond of, right?
I don't want to tease it.
Okay, well, Max is going to get philosophical with it, and trust me, it's going to take the conversation in directions you're not expecting. It's not going to just be here's how they built this or whatever. It's actually quite thought-provoking. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. So with that in mind, Allan, I'm leery of over-teasing, but I can promise this. We'll have our must-have item of the week. I've already posted that. Maybe we'll get to Tool Tales. I don't promise. We may or we may not. But I do have the next billion-dollar idea that you and I are going to roundtable on the show. I hope we have time for that. I think we're going to get to some of these things, but Allan, I'm not over teasing anything else because you threw a wrench in the works right before we went on the air, and I said, "Okay, Allan, this has to be discussed on the air." So so you've got. Allan's gonna, before we get to any of these things, Allan is gonna share some forklift tales. Right? Am I right, Allan? Okay.
Yeah, fun with things that maybe you shouldn't rent from the big box store.
Fun with forklifts,
Fun
right?
with forklifts oh my gosh. Well, all right, it all kind of begins like this. You can rent amazing heavy equipment from a big box store these days.
You can't rent a forklift.
Mm-hmm. You can rent
You got to have a license for those things.
You can rent a skiff loader. You can rent all kinds of equipment that you can basically disassemble your house with.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm already anticipating the phone calls. Wait, you can't rent a forklift, the ones that they're moving. I'm talking about the ones they're lifting the whole.
All right, you shouldn't, but...
It's kind of like on The Office. Michael, can you drive the forklift?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Should you drive the forklift?
I can and I have.
No.
Yeah, okay.
So welcome to... these are very powerful pieces of equipment.
Yeah, no kidding. Man.
I've got a job coming up in a week or two where I'm going to have to rent an excavator to move floor tile.
It's that bad, huh?
It's that bad.
Yeah. We've heard about your floor tile trauma.
You
but,
know,
okay.
people, you got to pay attention to how much stuff weighs.
Yeah.
You really drastically do. And that kind of brings us to forklifts for a moment. These are extremely powerful devices. And I know they look like a lot of fun.
They do. Yeah.
They are. But the number of minor mishaps that happens with those things. I cannot count the number of times I have sent somebody to go get a pallet, and then you hear this against the wall over there, and you realize that they have slid the forks not only under the pallet, but under the pallet and into the wall behind it, and are now attempting to lift the building.
And if you're really lucky, they slammed into the water line and whatever else.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
I just hear that music from what is his name? That old song.
Benny Hill.
Yeah, Benny Hill.
No.
I just hear Benny Hill going through my head.
Yeah.
No, the Benny Hill one was a very good friend of mine who, by the way, had a forklift license.
Wow.
Was moving pallets of I forget what we were having delivered. I think it was roofing, and he was moving the pallets. And as he was running from the front area back to the delivery area, there's a doorway you had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he didn't lower the forks enough.
Yeah.
So the back gate to the forks, the forks went under, but the back gate did not. And so at about 20 miles an hour, he went sailing through the doorway, and we heard the entire metal structure that we were all in wiggle.
Yeah.
Because you're just bam. And we're like, oh, no. And we had to go back and unstick the forklift. Another one is they don't do real well on parking lots.
Oh, that's interesting.
They're
What
heavy.
do you mean by that?
Well,
They are heavy. They're meant to be heavy because they got to lift
and of course,
heavy
the
pallets.
hotter the day, the weaker the parking lot.
There we go.
The other
You
thing
talk about
is,
asphalt?
Oh, yeah. The other thing is parking lots are not necessarily poured as carefully as like a foundation is. So there's a lot of air bubbles and pockets under those things.
Sure.
And if you happen to roll that back wheel over one of those air pockets, pook, right down into the asphalt you go.
That explains a lot, Alan, because I'm at the big box store literally just about every day, and I've noticed those pockets you're talking. It's like, where did that divot come from?
I know
Where's that hole?
exactly where that divot came
That was
from.
an air bubble that somebody. Okay,
And then
that's
now here's the best part. Now here's what you have to do. You either have to go get another forklift to get that forklift out of the hole, or you go get a house jack and some 2x4s.
right.
And now you're going to literally jack this poor thing up until it's above the hole, get enough 2x4s under it, and usually have to turn them sideways so you have enough strength for that wheel to come down for it to take off running.
You know what this is reminding me of too, Alan, with a forklift? It reminds me of, because it looks pretty straightforward. You lift things up, you do whatever. But it's kind of like when you have to carry, like, I don't know, a 6-foot ladder through a house. You're like, and you have it on your shoulders. Like, okay, well, you can't just willy-nilly do that because you swing the front end to avoid hitting something, and you just swung it into something behind you.
You will three-stooge everything.
And forklifts have all those kind of weird angles too. Like you lift it up, the skids, but now suddenly that upper piece is now pretty tall, and if they're not aware of that, I guess.
Oh, yeah, you got to be very aware of which way you're going.
Yeah.
The only problem with using like 2x4s to get them out of a hole is occasionally it grabs one of them and wedges it under it. So now you're sitting there teeter-tottering on top of this. Now you have to get really serious and get down in there and break it so that it can come off and go.
That's about right, Max.
I mention this because we're getting into that season where I'm going to get calls about, well, we went and rented a skiff loader and now it's stuck in the front yard.
Right.
It just, You can't imagine. You just can't imagine.
Well, people are out there and they're looking. I'm guilty of this myself, Alan. But you know how it is. You're dying to rent that one tool. You just want to. Just give me an excuse to go rent a forklift or something. But man, there's just you really do have to think.
It's just there's.
It'll be an expensive rental if you're not careful. So.
Well, I'm thinking of a dear friend of mine that rented a combination bulldozer excavator. It's got the little skiff loader on the front and the bulldozer on the arm on the back, and it's kind of like, all right, you have to remember the length and design of these things,
right? Because
stuff moves. You don't really. If you're used to driving a car, you're used to a single item. You're not used to keeping up with 3 or 4 points of contention as you go through. And even something as simple as a skiff loader, let me tell you something. Keep that bucket down where you can see it.
Oh, yeah.
Or you're going to be wearing about 400 pounds of dirt.
Oh, yeah.
Or gravel or pea gravel. Or
you're going to be sleeping with the fishes.
There you go. So.
Now, please don't flip them over. Oh, my gosh. I've even seen somebody tump over a forklift.
Oh, yeah. We've seen.
Don't. Yeah. Oh, no. Please don't.
I mean, I watch those videos, idiots at work. I mean, they get a lot of mileage out of forklift fails. So, well, I would say this too, Alan. If you go to the big box store, give them a wide berth. If you're ever looking down at the corner of a display or something, you're wondering why there's a big chunk out of it. It's because
it's because somebody clipped it.
They have enough to concentrate on using navigating those things through aisles. Plus, with everybody running in and out. So
now I will close this out with one thing though.
Okay.
If you watch somebody that's really good at it,
yeah. Oh, it's like poetry.
It is absolute artistry.
It is
how they can get a pallet full of shingles through an obstacle course that you would have swore was not humanly possible.
Oh, yeah.
Because of all the different obstructions at different levels and different heights. And they just move it and go, and it is just absolute a ballet.
It is. And it's always that one person at the big box store that looks like, I don't even want this person getting near this thing. And they look the most laid back and unqualified, and yet they're the ones that are like the forklift masters.
They are the one who is going to deliver 5,000 pounds of goods safely to the front of the store in one piece without running over anything.
Absolutely. So, all right.
Or anyone.
Yeah. I think we need to stay. We don't talk enough about forklifts on this show, Alan. So I think that needs to be
heavy equipment's more coming.
Absolutely. So all right. Well, hey, we're going to turn the floor over to Max. He had something he wanted to contribute. So let's hear it, Max.
And now, a deep cut with Maximilian.
All right, is that Benihana or Fruit Ninja? I'm trying to figure it out.
And is that a fail or was that a show of power?
That's a show of power.
Okay,
good.
Yeah.
That's
no,
a proper.
If you'd have gone, that'd have been a fail.
That's a fighting stance, baby.
What do you got, Max?
Something opposite of a fighting stance. Today, in honor of our buddy 732, who the other day, upon discovery of Joe's discussion of the Apollo, the horse lamp, he contributed his own little thing that he has in the house, and it's a replica of the Shigir Idol. And so I was like, what's the Shigir Idol? Well, today we're going to find out.
Oh, yeah, by the way, we didn't thank him. Yeah, he or she. That was a cool thing. They sent a picture, and it's a really unique.
Yes.
It's kind of weird looking, but it must be pretty old, right, Max?
I mean, it's not only pretty old, it's about 12,000 years old. And not only that, but I'm going to stump you, Joe.
Okay.
It's the oldest wooden sculpture in the world.
That we know of.
That we've discovered so far.
Max sounds very excited this morning. Okay.
We done gave him a topic to chew into.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, let's go back to 1890 when this was first discovered on January 24th in a peat bog in Shigir, which is in Russia. And what's rather interesting about this is the reason that it's been able to survive for so long is by virtue of the properties of said peat bogs. Peat bogs are
Peat bogs.
Peat bogs, not Wade bogs.
Oh, gotcha.
But anyways, peat bogs, what's really fascinating about peat bogs is, as Allan would like to use, it's an anaerobic environment, which means it lacks oxygen. And so, organic substances or organic beings, such as humans, or in this case, wood, are slow to decompose when you're in a peat bog. And so that's the reason it's been able to survive as long as it has, is by virtue of the properties of the peat bogs. And they believe that the Shigir Idol once stood about 17 feet high, which is pretty impressive.
Can you describe this thing? Because I want people to understand what. Because when you see this, you're like, there's no way this thing would even last, a summer here in Memphis. But what does this thing look like, Max?
So it consists of a series of faces inside the body, which is kind of just like it looks like strips of wood and everything divided in pieces because, they discovered it in about 10 pieces. So it kind of stands like a simplistic totem pole. So you kind of have like the main shaft, which just looks like a standard pieces of wood crossed together. And then you have this freaky looking simple head at the very top. It's just kind of round, and it has the features of an eyes, a nose, and a mouth.
I think it looks like an alien.
It could very well be an alien.
Which is very suggestive, Allan.
No,
Okay, go ahead.
So they're not really necessarily certain about what it might have been. It might have been like an idol to like one of their gods and everything, but it could also very well have been, in honor of the extraterrestrials they contacted back in the day.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it looks like an incense burner, but it's okay.
It's a pretty big incense burner.
Okay, but
is.
scale-wise, 17 feet with looks like it's only a few feet across in diameter or something. Structure, I don't know. It must have fallen into the peat bog. And I don't even know what, is a peat bog like a swamp or something,
Yes,
Allan?
exactly.
Okay. It doesn't, it sounds to me the opposite. It sounds like something would decay immediately. You'd have bugs and everything. So I'm sort of intrigued by why that would preserve things.
Well, here's where you get into layering.
Okay.
Okay, so you go to your average backyard, and about the first foot of your backyard is the actual contact impact zone. So let's say we've put up a fence. You and I have put in a fence.
Right.
We come back 20 years later. Where is the fence going to fail?
Yeah, at the ground level.
Right at the ground level. That is where all of the activity takes place. Now, oddly, when we put the puller on it and we yank the bottom part of that post out, the part of that post that was 18 inches in the ground, once you clean off the dirt, fundamentally looks almost brand new.
As long as it didn't get access to air or water, right?
Well, that's the big thing. You just don't have a suitable environment once it gets layered in. So let's just say this had been erected at the side of a pond or something like that and was a ceremonial place. Well, here comes the big thunderstorm. Here comes the big event, tornado, whatever. And that winds up covered.
Yeah.
So there's a flood, there's a rush of material, that winds up covered, and it doesn't get uncovered.
Yeah.
So, the next flood comes along and adds more stuff on top of it. Well, now it's basically sealed up and trapped. And when you get into these areas where we talk about wetlands, when we talk about a bog or anything, we're just talking about basic wetlands. And you love Chicago.
Well,
Chicago was basically built over drained wetlands.
Because I told you growing up, they discovered a woolly mammoth in my hometown of Glen Ellen, Illinois.
Yes.
It's on display at Wheaton College. You can see, and it had fur and everything. So, yeah.
And that is because it got buried deep enough in enough material that the oxygen and all of the other environmental forces, a.k.a. the insects, the sun, and all that, didn't get to it.
Okay, question. Max, do you know what kind of wood this was made out of?
It was made out of something called larch.
I've never worked with larch. Anybody out there that's a woodworker, tell me how it's going working with larch.
Yeah, I've never
I don't know
worked with
that they
either.
sell that at the big box store. You're making me think of something, though, you guys. You said this is to me, the element here is that you have an environment where mud is going to freely shift around, like you said, like a swamp or something like that. And you're talking about things being preserved because of that. And I don't know, am I wrong-headed to think about these women that go to the spa and they get mud on their face and everything? Is there some healing element that I'm Or is it simply because it's lacking oxygen? I
It
guess
just makes me think of the poetics. You are from dust, and to dust you shall return. Cover yourself in the thing that you were born from.
I think that's probably more to do with minerals and everything, right? But
Yeah,
so basically, the lack of oxygen is what's preserving stuff here.
In a lot of ways, I'll immediately turn around and tie this directly into home improvement.
Okay.
Because this is why we paint the wood. We put a coating on it to get it away from the oxygen and the other environmental forces.
Yeah.
Thus
Okay.
preserving it and keeping us warm and safe and comfortable and all that good stuff.
I didn't think of that part either. So Matt, so that's something to keep in mind when we're talking about preservation, I suppose. So
Exactly.
is keeping oxygen oxygen is man, you're sort of making my head turn here because I'm thinking of oxygen as being a good thing. Like, for example, a fence post you talked about.
Right.
Or a better example is shutters. I build a lot of shutters and
Right.
stuff. Okay, well, if a shutter has the ability to more or less breathe, like I usually put like a semi-transparent stain or something like that.
Right.
If it gets soaking wet and then it dries out in the sun, I've seen they can last 20-something years.
Right.
So I'm attributing that with oxygen or something. But what you're saying is if there was a way to perfectly seal it and not have any oxygen, it would actually last longer.
Much, much longer.
Good luck trying to have that, trying to do that,
It'll
though,
never
right?
happen in something like a shutter, but you are correct. Yeah.
So forget about water being the enemy. Oxygen's the enemy.
I mean, Allan, we're making some pretty powerful enemies here on this show. It's
Well,
like we're going to battle against water and now oxygen.
I could just picture like oxygen like pounding on the door, like clenching his fist, like waiting for you, buddy.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
we're
what you
really
got
sending
against
some
us?
mixed messages.
Well,
on
you
this
are
show.
looking at the 1-2 punch. You are looking at water and oxygen and UV radiation.
And hydrogen's along for the ride.
Oh, yeah. Hydrogen's just there to blow up. later.
Wow. I hope oxygen doesn't, cut itself off from us, Allan. We kind of need a weird intro. Very good, Max. And thanks, Agent 732. That was a good topic to land on. You're listening to Tool Talk Radio here at News Talk 98.9 The Roar, Memphis. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
I've been trying to make you know about safety without actually learning about safety the way I did. By not listening to my mom when that snake jumped out of the policeman's boombox.
News Talk 98.9 The Roar of Memphis.
That was really confusing. So tell me that was a Futurama clip there, Max. That's what it sounds like.
It's Adventure Time.
Okay, just as weird.
I knew.
But also
knew.
John DiMaggio.
Okay. I think I agree, but
Yeah.
we don't necessarily endorse that policy. Anyway, welcome
I
back
do.
to Tool Talk Radio, coming to you from the Brown Refrigeration Studios. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning, here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass. You can call or text us at the Big M Roofing and Remodeling Hotline at 901-683-0989. And we invite you to go to Tool Talk Radio and like the page. We always like it, and we'll even give you a shout out. If you like it during the show, we'll say, hey, welcome aboard or something. Some of the usual suspects are over
Yes.
there right now. Abigail chimed in earlier. Robbie's already contributed his thoughts to our must-have item of the week, which we'll get to shortly. But apparently, Max, not to be outdone, old Agent 732's already chimed in this morning.
They
So-
said they used peat bogs as ancient refrigerators and that they found 3,000-year-old butter that is still edible. And you know what I replied? I said, you know what? You know the show, hey, I'm a home improvement agent 732. You're slowly becoming our Wilson.
I don't think there's anything slow about it.
the Wilson of Tool Talk. There
Yes.
you go. So okay, so let me make sure I understand this. They buried their food under the, well, I suppose if you have no other refrigeration, why not?
Well, it's all right.
You better put it in a nice worm-proof barrel or something, right?
Well, you don't really have to worry that in a peat bog when you're cutting out peat, because peat will also burn like charcoal.
What is peat? It's like a
All right,
highly
peat is-
mineralized.
It is just compressed vegetable matter. So
Sounds like that dish that Chris Traeger served on Parks and Recreation.
it does.
It's not so much a meat as it is a vegetable loaf.
Yeah.
It's compressed down. It's it's basically compressed compost.
I was going to say it sounds like a compost pile.
It
but
is.
ultra. So it's got to be very nutrient. It'd be great if you took chunks of that and threw it in your garden or something, right?
You mean like all those
fertilizer?
giant bags of peat moss you can buy at the home store
Right.
and all that? Yeah,
Right, okay.
It's awesome for that.
So-
but refrigeration-wise, anytime you got away from the environment and
Yeah.
controlled it, like in a cave,
Okay.
caves actually run about 55 degrees.
So we don't think only about temperature; it's oxygen
It
deprivation.
is.
So what were you saying, Max?
Just a brief aside, our buddy Keith also texted in and they gave us an article about, well, what is larch?
Oh, good.
Yes.
Okay. Put a pin in that. Hang on. I want to learn about larch. Give me 1 second, Max. So
Learn
so
about larch. Alliteration.
we want to finish our So wait. Okay. So this. I mean, I'm sure it is cooler under there.
Yes. Well, yeah.
And
Think
you're
about
taking away the oxygen.
in this country for years and years and years, and in some rural areas, you still have quote unquote root cellars.
Yeah.
And the idea is to get away from the sun and get away from rapid temperature changes, because something like a pumpkin would last for honestly months past the fall, so long as you didn't let it freeze or let sunlight and everything get to it. That pumpkin will sit there and be perfectly good almost a year later. So there are a lot of tricks to preserving and moving things forward. So when you converted a volatile like milk into butters or cheeses, now you could store these things for years to come. That's also where we get into a lot of the smoking meats and that type of stuff. The biggest thing is remove the moisture and get it out of the active environment.
Is that why you see so many like desiccated like meat or like fish like in like ancient houses and everything? Is
Yes.
gets the moisture out so you can preserve it longer?
Yeah, dried fish, salted fish, you'll see a lot of that, especially in the northern countries. So a big shout out to our growing fan base in Norway, by the way.
Oh,
guys.
yeah. Cool.
Believe
Our
it or
people.
not, yeah, I checked I checked last night, and I'm like, oh, Norway's getting bigger. So I don't know how to say hello in Norwegian, but I'm going to say hi to everybody.
Yeah.
And yes, when you go through a lot of the archaeological things, especially Sweden, Norway, and up there's a lot of dried fish.
I also see that in like Japanese movies and everything
Yes.
too.
Well, that's a great way to preserve it, because once it's dried, the bacteria that would harm us doesn't really have anything to grow on.
You know, I sure didn't expect the show to turn into this discussion, and I guess we got to move along. But I do have another observation, Alan. One of the big breakthroughs with food storage and food preservation was freeze drying.
Yes.
And part of the process is getting rid of all of the air.
Yes.
Right. And like if you see a package in the freezer section, it's not.
It's vacuum
It's
packed.
a vacuum pack.
Yes.
So that okay. I guess that's going to go into our arsenal of enemies now, right? So
Well-
now we've made enemies with oxygen and water.
Well, let me
we're
tie this
doomed, Alan.
absolutely
I mean,
directly into your home improvement.
Okay.
Think about your windows that are environmentally controlled, AKA you have a double paned window, which creates a buffer between the outside world, the volatile world, and the stable world we want to live in.
That's true because there's no air in there. There's like a gas that.
There's argon gas,
Right.
which is an inert gas which keeps the outside world outside, provides a temperature and UV radiation buffer coming to the inside world.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Max, in a second, I wanna hear about Keith's input about larch because I've never heard of that. But before we get to that, this is a perfect transition to talk about our good buddy Jay Hill with Big M Roofing and Remodeling.
Indeed.
So, okay, now one thing I have to believe he's not trying. I hope he's not trying to keep the air out of our home because that wouldn't be good. So.
No, he's trying to keep the volatility outside,
Okay.
and protecting us with, roofing, and as he likes to say, armor cladding your home.
Exactly.
You talk about making enemies with nature.
Yeah, no kidding. So, but Jay Hill, he will go to battle against water.
Oh, yes.
He basically Jay Hill's emphasis with Big M Roofing and Remodeling is really like you said, Alan, the armor plating of your home, the roof, the siding, the gutters, the windows. I don't know if he does doors. I guess we'll ask him about that.
Yep, I'll have to
However,
ask him.
that's his specialty, and that's what he stands by. And especially when it comes, we do want to key in on his roofing as well because he is 5 stars at the Better Business Bureau on all of his work. He's a GAF Master Elite installer, installing roofing systems that these things are well thought out. These things are guaranteed for their lifetime transferable warranties for your home, which is really unheard of. That is revolutionary, However, Jay's one of the other unique properties when you're dealing with Jay is the fact that he's a former insurance agent, and he there are many times where you may have a homeowner's claim not only for your roof but other damage to your home, and navigating that process can be very tricky, and there's a lot of dynamics at play, and Jay is sort of the expert with that, and he can help you navigate. And there's something very exciting when you discover you do have a path forward and that you're not going to be shelling out tens of thousands of dollars, and your homeowner's insurance is there to help you with that process. And the consultation is free. That's the other thing. So it's great. Get Jay over there. And if you also need financing, Jay has a really great financing program with 30 lenders, and you can apply in minutes and be approved. You're going to be approved for some of them. And then once you're approved, then you start picking and choosing which terms meet your needs the best. So great people over there, top quality workmanship, and Jay is just a really fun and dynamic character to deal with. And he knows everybody here in the Mid-South. So he's going to get the job done much quicker than you think as well. So you can call Jay directly at 901-484-5645 or go to bigmroofingandremodeling.com. All right, for those just tuning in, Max, we were learning about this structure that you told us that's what got the whole Peat bog conversation started. The Shigir Idol in Russia that you said it's really old, right? So
Keith had a follow up to that, and he was giving us a explanation of what larch is, and that's what the Shigir Idol is made out of.
Never heard of that
Shigir.
wood.
So Peat, a Western larch is a soft wood. It's used for interior decoration, and it is predominantly found in the lower slopes and mountains of British Columbia. Ew, gross, Canada.
Now, what are you making fun of the? We like the Canadians. The Canadians don't bother anybody.
I was just kidding.
Wait a minute. Wait. Hold on, because you said this thing was found in Russia.
But that was the area, I guess, that this article is covering too. But there are probably areas that are more Russia-like and everything, and maybe British Columbia is like that. But what's also interesting
that's
too,
very thought-provoking.
The larch also grows in Siberia.
What's also kind of interesting too is that it's very resistant to wildfires, in that it grows really well in fire-blackened soil. But not only that, but because the thick bark of western larch and its habit of shedding lower branches, it makes it even more resistant to wildfire. So it's a very hardy wood and everything in terms of like its resistance in nature.
Huh. I wonder if it's got a lot of moisture, high moisture content.
Actually,
too,
it's very low moisture content because the wood itself is virtually waterproof.
The bark?
No, the wood itself. It's a soft wood, but it grows very fast for the cold climates. It's a conifer.
I've never heard of wood being water. Okay, I got to learn more about this larch.
Mahogany, teak, and larch are all very water resistant.
Huh. You could use it in your you're doing your kitchen remodeling. Why don't you use a little bit of larch? Because you could use it for interior finish, fine veneer, flooring, sashes, and doors. Okay. And they also use them for small poles, rail cross ties, and mine timbers.
That's very interesting. Okay, because it's always cool to learn more about exotic wood. I don't know if that's an exotic wood or not, but Keith, thanks for that input, because I didn't know that. Never. I've probably seen larch and didn't know that what I was seeing. But
it's been hiding under your nose this whole time.
Yeah. It would look like a pine to the average person.
Yeah. All right. Cool. We got great listeners here on Tool Talk, so send us your comments and input. We're always eager to learn. So, all right, Allan, let's switch gears. It is time for our must-have item of the week, and I brought a few items. They're all the same item, but tell people what I am holding up here.
You are holding up the infamous spade bits or boring bits.
No, he's not. He's holding up a throwing star and shuriken combination.
See, Max sees what he wants to see, and this could be probably a nice lethal weapon in your hands, right,
Could
Max?
be, has been. Just look at Allan.
So if you don't know what I think they call it a spade bit because it looks a little like a spade shovel.
Mm-hmm.
But boring bit, it makes holes in wood.
It makes holes in a lot of things.
But it's interesting because when you see this at first glance, you're probably going to, well, it's okay. The tip off is you're going to find it in the drill bit section of the big box store. So you're like, okay, well, and then you see the bottom shaft. So basically, folks, if you can picture something, it's about 6 or 7 inches long. And I brought a variety pack because they make different size holes. And that's what they do. It's a flat bit.
Yes.
And it's got a point on it, and then it spins around and it makes a hole. But we have some caveats with this. Okay, yeah. Right, Allan?
Where to start with this?
Yeah.
All right, one, if you are looking to make, you need an access point through basically wood or any of the wood plastic combinations.
Right.
This is your bit. It's gonna drill a hole through it, no problem.
Right.
You just line up the center spindle because that's your guide. You just put that right in the dead center of where you want the hole.
Yeah.
And when you begin, don't just gun it. Just get it started so you get a nice little drill bit going. And as soon as it's stable, then you can gun it and really get as much power on it as you want and ease into the hole.
Right.
Now, my advice on this is going to be, especially if you're going through a board and you're going to see both sides of the board, do not drill all the way through. When you can see the tip pop out the other side, stop what you're doing, switch sides, and finish the bore from the other side if that's possible, if you want a good, clean hole.
Right.
Because otherwise, that spade bit is going to kind of shred its way out.
Yeah, these are
going to tear up the edge of the hole on the way out.
Yeah, these are not finesse bits. In the one this is sort of my go-to. Like, for example, if maybe you have to pull the sheetrock off of a wall, and you want to run some wiring or something, and you just need to make a hole for the wires to go through. Nobody's ever going to see it. Well, grab one of these. It's perfect. And
perfect.
if they chip up the wood or whatever, I've had times where these holes, depending on the type of wood, what condition it's in, or how weird of an angle you're having to go in at, I've actually made a triangle shaped hole because the thing bounces around, or it hit a nail, or it hit a knot in the wood or something. So I personally would not use these as finesse. I've got some really high quality boring bits, and those are for when I'm doing the fine detail work. However, our buddy Robbie, Allan, chimed in on the Facebook post, and he sent me a picture, and I'm sort of marveling. He said he uses these on hardwood floors to make, when they make these pegs, like they're kind of semi-decorative and semi-functional, and he puts, and I don't know, man, those holes have to be very precise and clean. Robbie, you're a braver man than me. I would not touch these for that. I mean,
well,
oh man, that sounds like it's all
right. Well, Robbie gets a get out of jail free card on that.
Okay,
because he's filling the hole with a peg.
Yeah, but still, I mean, this is as exposed as you're going to get, and it's probably oak and some other hardwood.
He's going to have to use a good, clean, sharp bit. He's not going to take one like, I've got a big old 1.5-incher,
right?
That I will freely confess that I will use on dirt.
Does it have a name?
Dirt. Huh?
Yeah, nah, I haven't named this one, but
what are you talking about?
Well, all right.
There we go, Max. Once again,
it's one of those things where, you've got to put up a post or something temporarily to mark out something,
right?
And a lot of times you're hitting tree roots and bush roots and all kinds of stuff, and you can't get something easily into the ground. Well, that first few inches is the part where all the matting is for all the roots and stuff. I will find that a spade bit works exactly like its name says, and you can drop a perfectly good inch-round hole right through the tree roots and the shrubbery, and it's right down in, drop my little signal pole in, and I'm done.
Okay, Max, we don't need a counterpoint, but in an effort to not be sued, Allan, your approach here sounds like a perfect way to dislocate your wrist or something, because let's say this about these bits too, Allan. If you're drilling with a spade bit and let's suppose you're drilling through something and it hits a knot or it hits something, that bit will just stop and
they'll
jerk
yeah.
the drill.
They will
badly. I've had that happen, and it's
yeah.
like you better be holding on with two hands when you're using this
Yes.
for sure. But boy, you and Robbie are braver than me because I wouldn't do either of those things that you're doing. So this is just rough work for me with these things.
I've used a spade bit as a finishing bit before and doing exactly what Robbie was doing because there was a decorative peg that had to go in that hole. And I got to tell you, I was very slow, both hands on it and a little bit of sweat.
Yeah.
Kind of going, all right, don't wiggle, don't sneeze, don't let the ladder, don't move around because you got to hold these pretty tight. Now, for rough work, like I said, if we're running wires through 2x4s or something like that, that is your tool.
Yeah. Hey, I want to make another just real shout out to it's more of our Facebook friends. Angel, of course, weighed in. She approves, but our buddy Margaret Mickelson, I know she's a crafts person. She's not only, she likes to fix up these homes, and I know she's probably used spade bits as well or something. So thanks for chiming in, Margaret. But this is something I just think I don't know. Legally, I guess, I don't know, Alan. I'm a little concerned about your approach here. I hope I don't endorse what Alan does at all with this.
You don't endorse most of what I do. But it is a great tool, but you have to be careful with this.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah, I would say that's good. So, all right. Well, that was a pretty good one. And these really are, we talk about must-have items. These are something, and they're cheap. You can get a pack of these probably for, $10 or $15, and but they wear out. Just keep that in mind.
You chew them up pretty quickly.
You hit
at least
one
I
thing,
do.
and it's gonna dull. So okay, Alan, I've got something. I've got our next $1 billion idea coming up here. But before I get to that, I just want to mention something. I want to mention our good buddy Larry Brown with Brown Refrigeration. Yes. I guarantee he uses all his tools correctly and safely and according to code, Alan. Not
yes,
like
he
you
does.
do.
And I have him on speed dial.
And it's important, too, because your HVAC system, there is nothing more of a precision instrument in your home. I'm going to just go out and say that. I can't think of anything in your home that is needs to be more precisely calibrated and functioning properly. And if it's not, boy, your life's not going to be pleasant.
We're talking about our air.
You're talking about air quality. You're talking about air conditioning in terms of, moisture content, in terms of the clean air. So you need a company that is rock solid. They've been around forever, and they're not going anywhere, Alan. They have a solid business culture, and that's the company you want to deal with your HVAC system. You also want somebody that is dealing with the state-of-the-art technology. They use Train. That's their systems, and of course they also use the Remy Halo system. I have to believe anybody installing an HVAC system these days is using the Remy Halo system, which uses the UV power of the sun. The air that comes into your system runs through the filtration system, then the Remy Halo system, and out pumps clean air. And all of the surfaces that it lands on, it's cleaning it. It's got cleaning particulates all through the UV power of the sun, and much more affordable than you would think. So,
yes.
And, of course, your HVAC system needs to be tuned up. It needs to be maintained. So it's good to have a relationship with a company that you're going to be seeing. They're going to be checking in once or twice a year with you. And also they can help you anticipate if there is any problems upcoming, so that if you do need a new system, you're prepared in advance. And keeping it running properly saves you money. It's more or less going to pay for itself. It really does. It pays for itself to have these tune-ups. So, and if you do need financing, Brown Refrigeration is another company that's got awesome financing. Great people. Get in touch with them. You can call them directly at 901-362-1881 or go to their very easy-to-remember website, brownref.com. All right, Alan, we're going to make some money here.
Okay, I'm ready.
Well, we got to put your scientific brain to work. So, Max, you don't have anything for me?
Not anything that would be legal.
Okay. Oh, well, there we go.
I thought you'd
I'm just
chime in.
thinking of like Money by Pink Floyd, but I can't do that.
All right, well, let's just make this quick. I have the next $1 billion idea. And, folks, if you're out there and you've ever worked with joint compound,
right,
or if you've ever had to float a wall,
yes.
And what do we mean by that? Max, you're probably wondering what I mean by floating a wall.
Using the force?
No. Okay. So let's suppose you've got a couple pieces of sheetrock, Alan, and maybe one of them, you use your joint tape and you use your whatever. Well, sometimes those may be sitting unevenly, and you don't just put, a little strip of spackle and sand it and call it a day. Usually you have to kind of extend it out maybe a foot or two, and you put like a very graduated you know what I mean?
Right.
You're angling it. So technically that wall is not flat, but if you float it out and sand it correctly, it looks flat. So, well, here's my thing. For that process, and I'm just going to say I hate sheetrock work and I hate spackling. So maybe that's what motivates me here. But, Alan, what if you could invent a spackle that you just slap it on? You put like a half-inch thick of this thing, but it's not so hard that it's impossible to sand. You put it on a big heavy-duty thing of spackle, and it dries reasonably quickly and hard, and then you sand it, and so it's one coat deep-set spackle. I don't think there's such a thing made. I've heard people make claims, but it never works, that because sometimes if you put spackle on too hard, it doesn't dry in the center. That's the hook, right? The top will dry, then the inside never dries. So
That's true. The closest thing I have ever found to that is some stuff called Elastopatch, and it's by DAP, and it's designed for cracks when you're working on rough surfaces like masonry or brick, where we got to float out stuff. That's the closest.
I'm
thing
talking
I've
one
found.
coat. That's my hook.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I got a one quote solution to that. But the best thing I found was Elastopatch.
Oh,
But it's good.
you don't sound very motivated. You don't think this is going to happen, huh?
No, actually, I think it could, but I'm trying to think of what in the world would you do to keep the flexibility and keep it from cracking.
Okay.
I'm going to give that some thought.
All right, we're gonna marinate on this, and if you're out there and you're a chemist, that's the next $1 billion idea.
Yeah, give us a call.
Deep set, instant dry spackle. Well, Alan, speaking of, I don't know how to segue off of that. You're listening to Tool Talk Radio. Hour 1 is in the can, but boy, are you going to want to stay tuned for Hour 2, where our great moments in building history, we're going to discuss the friendly confines of Wrigley Field.
News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis. Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
And welcome to Hour 2 of Tool Talk Radio, coming to you from the Brown Refrigeration Studios. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning, here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass. You can call or text us at the Big M Roofing and Remodeling Hotline at 901-683-0989, like some people have been doing this morning, Max, as you would expect. And, of course, we also invite you to go to Tool Talk Radio's Facebook page and give us a like and check out the posts over there. We posted our must-have item of the week, which we kind of went out of order today, Alan, because we wanted to have plenty of time for this discussion. And but you can see the must-have item of the week and also a video chronicling it's a really all-encompassing video about the topic we're going to get to in a minute in our great moments in building history. So but we definitely want you to be a part of the conversation. So send us your thoughts, and we're usually pretty good about answering more or less in real time. So all right, you guys, I don't want to dilly-dally at all. This is a topic I've wanted to get to for really a long time, and finally we're going to do it.
And now, great moments in building history.
All right, Alan, I think I've been pretty good in recent months about not bringing up this topic. If anybody's listened to Tool Talk Radio for any amount of time, they know I'm a lifelong Cubs fan, which,
I don't know what you did to get a life sentence.
That's
really.
how it works, Alan. And if you grow up in Chicago, it's very rare where you meet somebody who likes it. It's very rare if you meet somebody who says, "Oh yeah, I love the Cubs and the White Sox." It's not really that. It's the weirdest dynamic. I don't know how to tell you, but it's just you either like one or the other. I don't know why that is. I think it'd be great if you could
dislike
root for both teams
evenly, so I figure I'm pretty fair.
Yeah, but anyway, and I have to believe a large part of my love of the Cubs has to do with the structure we're going to discuss today, which is Wrigley Field. And getting you guys on board with this, I had to let you know that we're not going to. This isn't going to just be okay. It was built in this year. This is how many people it see. No, this is actually quite philosophical. And Max, this is even going to tie into some of your some of your philosophy topics that you enjoy. So let's just start with this. I just want to share kind of an interesting observation. Max, you've actually been. I thought when you were a little kid you drove by Wrigley Field or something like that, right?
I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't care enough to try to remember.
Well, that's pretty hostile. So, Allan, have you ever been to Wrigley Field?
No.
Okay. Well, what's interesting about it is it's in the north side of Chicago, and when you drive up, you know how there was this tendency in the old days, ballparks were supposed to be in a city, and they literally
Right.
So you're driving, you're just driving. It looks like any neighborhood. It's all, a bunch of brownstones and a few businesses, and then all of a sudden it's there. And if you keep driving, all of a sudden it's just gone. It doesn't. You know what I mean? It's like it is literally shoehorned in. There is not this big blast radius of 10 or 12 city blocks. It's just there. It's crammed into this neighborhood, which is sort of. It's interesting. It presents a lot of parking challenges. But
Well, in 1914, when it was built, there weren't a lot of parking things. It's kind of like, where'd you leave your horse?
Well,
You
maybe,
know.
but the thing about it is it creates a really cool ambiance. Like today, it's called Wrigleyville. The whole
Right.
There is a sort of blast radius around in the terms of the vibe that it does. But one of the things we're going to talk about today is the notion. The two things is the spirit of a structure, which why there's a certain indefinable quality to a structure like Wrigley Field. But also, Max, we want to. What interested you was you could say Wrigley Field is a modern day ship of Theseus. Could you tell us quickly what the ship of Theseus is?
The ship of Theseus is a thought experiment from ancient times, and it came from Plutarch, or the Life of Theseus. And he was discussing how the famous statement of Athens named Theseus had a ship, and said ship had survived past his time. And then but as time went by, you had to replace the boards and the planks or whatever. And then, so that the original planks weren't there anymore. So would you still call that ship the ship of Theseus, even though none of the original parts still are on there?
There you go. Because it's funny. I know a lot of Cubs fans, Allan, and they come in all ages and all varieties, and I know these older guys are like, well, that's not my Wrigley Field now that they've added the big Jumbotron, or that's not my Wrigley Field,
Right.
Wrigley Field is supposed to be this, or this. And then when you look at the history of it, you're like, well, the thing's more or less been under construction since it started. So let's just throw this out there real quick. You're right, Allan. It opened on April 23rd in 1914, which also happens to be William Shakespeare's birthday. And it's also the day that he reportedly died on, which is interesting because the Cubs' history kind of plays out like a Greek tragedy. And I know all about it now.
So the pitching mound would be the hill he would literally die on.
Yeah.
But on more than one occasion, trust me.
It's interesting when you learn how old the organization is. I think the Cincinnati Reds started in like 1874, and I think the Cubs did too. Professional baseball back in the not that far after the Civil War. It's pretty fascinating. And whether you love baseball or hate it, I'm sorry, there was a time that it was the sport in our country.
Right.
That was the national pastime, and it's still, still beloved today. But anyway, let's. I just want to get through the bullet points here real quick. So it was built by the Zachary brother, or the Davis brothers, Zachary and Charles. And it's this is the part I think interested you, Allan. This is a monument to steel and concrete in terms of that. It was built on the site of a former seminary, which makes me really wonder. That's point A. What does that do to a spirit? It cost $250,000 to make, and the original seating was $14,000 people. It was called Weigman Park, named after the owner of the team. And then it changed, so that was 1914 to 1920. It changed to Cubs Park from 1920 to 1926, and then finally it was changed to Wrigley Field when the gum magnate William Wrigley Jr. bought the team.
Yep.
And so that's the naming thing. And really, the park we're talking about really kind of starts with Wrigley Field, you could say, because up until then, there was a lot of transition. Like the original team was, I think, called the Federals or something like that. It didn't become the Cubs
they
to like
were
what,
the
1920s.
Whales.
Well, there was the Whales. Then there was the Well,
But
go
they
ahead,
were a
Alan.
member of
you
the
got it
Federal
pulled up.
League.
Yeah, because I don't really care much about it till they turned into the Cubs. But
Until
so,
it got infested.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Alan, I'm kind of worried that you have this much baseball knowledge.
It's terrifying. I was actually a scorekeeper for many years.
Oh,
So thus
interesting.
my disdain for many sports. So
Okay.
it started out they were the Chicago Whales, which I find amusing because they're right on the Great Lakes.
Yeah, we should say this
So-
is a mile from Lake Michigan.
This
which
thing is-
you're dealing with wind.
Yeah,
You're dealing
this
with
is-
everything.
I was about to say, all right, one, the choice of where they put this was kind of interesting because it was close to the water because in 1914 you didn't have a lot of cars.
Right. Yeah.
So a lot of people lived and worked down by the docks and the wharves and all that. So you built the stadium where the people were
right.
so the people could get to it. Now, all these years later, over 100 years later, you look at it and go, who in their right mind put their baseball stadium, that
Right.
close?
Right.
Well, there's a reason why. Is you put it where the people were. You didn't put it 10 miles out in the country.
Well, let's face it.
Nobody could make it.
Large bodies of water have always been a place where you set up cities, and because it's for shipping, it's for people. It's Lake Michigan's beautiful anyway. It looks like the ocean, so you'd want to be near Lake Michigan and you build out.
Now,
So,
when you're flying in to Illinois, especially Chicago,
Yeah.
and depending upon which airline you're on, some of them come out of the cloud cover over the lake.
right,
And you're kind of like, and we're in the ocean. How? Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not a small lake.
I want to say something about that, Alan, because the other thing is, you're always talking about, we're always talking about here on Tool Talk, incorporating your environment with your
Yes.
structure. Well, the thing about it is, so a baseball stadium is more or less you could say a square. If you look at it from above, it's square-ish, okay?
Yeah.
And so you could put any corner of the square anywhere you want. So it was strategically placed where you have home plate positioned where you're going to have the lake. Chicago is very windy. You have that lake effect wind. So you'd want to position it where the wind is behind you, and so you get a lot of home runs because that makes it exciting. So we've talked about the wind blowing out at Wrigley Field. So that was a design.
And that's
decision.
an interesting twist, especially when you start talking about. We are also going to tie this into urban planning,
Right.
because
Yeah.
urban planning also has a lot to do with your own personal home. And in my neighborhood last year, we had a number of really big storms.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I ended up getting a new roof because I had storm damage. But my house was angled in such a way that I didn't take as much of a brunt as neighbors 2 houses on either side of me.
Right.
And they got siding ripped off and all of that. So when they were building this, the lake was a huge concern. So you couldn't do certain ornamental things other people were doing because the wind would have just tore them off.
Sure.
Is this
It's-
another example of water being the enemy?
I don't know. Now we're getting into wind. Now wind isn't the enemy if you're batting and the wind's behind you. You want,
Yeah, you want to get that ball
Now,
up
if you're-
nice and high so
Yeah, I
that
think
wind can
we're kind of
help you
done
out.
with making enemies with nature today.
Yeah,
Let's make peace if we can.
Yeah. Now, if you're a pitcher, wind is definitely the enemy because you got the ball, whatever. But there are those times where the wind's blowing in. So,
Right.
well, I want to steer into something because my launch for this, and this is what got Max interested, was the notion of this being a modern day ship of Theseus, because this was not Wrigley Field did not just descend from and was just built right out of the gate as this iconic place. It was more or less a ballpark like every other ballpark,
Right.
and so I want to but there are even people that are just loosely familiar with baseball. I think everybody knows the iconic elements of Wrigley Field. So I just want to go through a quick little bullet point here, Alan. So it was built, as we said, it opened in 1914, and just think about the state of the world back then. Okay, in 1927, baseball was pretty, by then baseball was the sport, so they had to add upper decks. So now you went from 14,000 to, I want to say, I know today they can seat about 40,000, but I think back then it was closer to 30-something thousand. Okay, so now you've just more or less doubled your attendance possibility, and you made the upper decks. In 1934, they added this famous marquee, which is outside of the ballpark, which is still there to this day. It was, it's kind of this, Art Deco looking thing. It was originally green, but it was later painted red, and it's still red to this day. But here's the year. This is something that I find fascinating. So in 1937, this was the most pivotal year. And I'm thinking, okay, Allan, 1937, we're just pre-World War II. We're in the middle of the Great Depression, all right? I mean, are we on the tail? I guess
we're recovering.
We're not doing great.
Yeah, we've done better, yeah.
But the 1930s are a fascinating period to study because in the 1930s, it seems like they were trying to counteract that. And you remember all of the really, even in Hollywood, in film, and in technology and car design, everything was ultra futuristic, ultra kind of, whatever. We were really looking to the future and trying to, create optimism. So in 1937, there were some noteworthy additions. First of all, they added the boomerang-shaped bleacher section in the outfield because there was no bleacher seating before that. Then they create thus giving birth to the bleacher bums. And I have a quick little thing. Can I just mention this? Because this is sort of a fun. I think this is. I don't know if this is urban myth or an actual fact. Maybe Agent 732 can research this for that. But Max, have you ever wondered why when you're watching a baseball game, which I know you don't watch a lot, but have you ever wondered why there's that blank space in every outfield in the center field area? There is a blank space where they don't let people sit.
Is that so you don't get whacked by the ball?
No, supposedly this goes back to the bleacher bums of Wrigley Field. More or less, what they did was, so if you're thinking about it, if you're the batter and then you're looking at the pitcher in the center field area, there'd be people sitting back there. Well, what they figured out was these bleacher bums, they would have black jackets with white insides on the jacket. So when the opposing team came to bat, they flipped it over and they put their white jackets on there. They put the white side out, and they'd probably wave white flags and stuff. And what that did is it created sort of an optical illusion so that when the pitcher released the ball blended in visually with these white jackets, and it made it really hard to hit. And then when their team came up, they put the black side on. And they really messed with the players. And then eventually they said, okay, this isn't good sportsmanship. So I think all stadiums banned it. If I'm wrong about that, feel free to correct me, but I'm pretty sure.
It makes a great story either way. So.
Now, how about Fenway Park with that ridiculous obstruction in it?
The green wall. Yeah, that's a good, because that is the oldest park. I guess that might be its own discussion.
I thought Wrigley was the oldest National League.
No, it's by a year. I want to say by a year, Fenway Park is the oldest. No, okay. Well, it's the oldest. It's the oldest national for sure, but they're both the oldest basically. Right. But I've never liked that big green wall. I'm sorry. I think it looks dumb. But anyway, okay. But Allan, also in 1937, they added that famous hand-operated scoreboard in center field, which they still use to this day. Very, very iconic. But above all, the first thing you think about when you're looking at Wrigley Field is the ivy. There's no other stadium with ivy on the outfield wall, even though if you still run into it, going full speed, it doesn't feel good. There's still a brick wall behind it. But they planted the ivy, and those three changes, I think you could argue, give birth to what we would call the spirit of Wrigley Field. So, but that's interesting to me that it came about in the 1930s. But see, to this day, Allan, they've still continued to make improvements, and they continue to add. They added the Jumbotron. They've added a lot, but I guess I'm just, so the concept of the spirit of a structure, what creates that? Because there is an indefinable vibe when you go to Wrigley Field, but yet, I don't know.
Well, you and I had discussed this, and it's like a lot of other ballparks came and went over the years.
Right.
A lot of them eventually became mini marts and supermarkets and malls and other such. A few buildings throughout history suddenly become icons.
Right.
And Wrigley Field, like I said, is in a weird spot.
Well, I wanted to share something with you, and this might give us some insight. And Max, this might trigger you a little bit. So, okay, I've grown up going to Wrigley Field. So, my main time, I guess, as a kid was back in the 1970s. I remember it, and those were dark times. You could go to Wrigley Field, and there might be, there might be 3,000 people in the whole state, right, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. It looks nothing. Empty,
right?
And you could get it. You could go sit in the bleachers for $2. It was literally, right, and it was almost like a ghost town and everything. Well, in 1975 or whenever the heck, in the middle 70s, we had like Tiger Stadium, we had Yankee Stadium, we had all these old stadiums. So the fact that Wrigley Field was old wasn't all that interesting to people. Nobody cared. Well, as the years go by, and especially once you get into like the 1990s, all of these ballparks, like I don't know when they tore down Yankee Stadium, but man, all of these ballparks are disappearing. And suddenly you're down to Wrigley Field and Fenway Park. And even though the Cubs were still playing terrible, I mean, they went 108 years without winning a World Series. All of a sudden, this old structure in the minds of people suddenly becomes very important. It becomes a historic artifact just by virtue of the fact that there's not many left. So it's kind of interesting, when does a structure go from being an eyesore and broken down and run down to a structure we have to protect at all costs and is now an iconic structure? And I feel like every city has things like that.
I'll pick a Memphis artifact we had a place here called Liberty Land.
Oh, yeah.
That was
that's where Elvis hung out, right?
Exactly. Elvis used to rent it all the time, and he and his friends would go hang out. And the Zippin' Pippin was his favorite roller coaster.
Right.
And, as time goes on, the Liberty Land kind of lost its gloss. And
lost its gloss.
Well, just, kind of lost its a little bit, but so the park finally closed, and the park has long since been removed. But the Zippin' Pippin, even back then, was one of the oldest examples of a wooden roller coaster with all the sound and rattling and clack, 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 clack that went to it, that made it just one of the classics. And it is now in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Somebody came down here, disassembled it board by board, stick by stick, label by label, and moved it to Green Bay, where the Zippin' Pippin still runs today.
Well, here, let me throw this at you, though, Alan, because I think a lot of this has to do with aesthetics. Regardless of whether you're a Cubs fan or not, Wrigley Field is a beautiful place. It visually, it's almost stunning, especially when you go to a night game or something. However, there are plenty of historic buildings that don't necessarily get the love. Here in Memphis, Alan, the Coliseum is under heavy debate. I mean, it's still there, but when's the last time we used it? And it's kind of a cookie cutter structure. But then, of course, the Beatles played there, all these famous bands. So from that perspective, it's an iconic structure. But I don't know, man. Are we biased towards the beautiful? Just like with people? I've heard attractive people get more benefits in life.
Well, Wrigley Field is a neoclassical standard, but it's not any great beauty.
Oh,
it's not.
I disagree, Alan.
Well, there are
You've
other
never been
buildings that have looked as good that are long since gone. Mm-hmm. But I think in this particular one, it became sort of a nostalgic icon just simply because nobody ever tried to get rid of it. It was used consistently, whether the game was going well or, all of that, whoever was playing there. It didn't really matter. It just became a part of the community. And now we're looking at it going, all right, well, it's really intrinsic. And if we lose this, we lose that connection to where baseball came from in 1915.
Yeah, baseball. The Wrigley Field is never going to be allowed to be torn down. It's protected for one thing, but even nationwide, I don't think I don't want Fenway Park to be torn down either. And I'm not a Red Sox fan, so I think we'll wind up. We've got some closing thoughts with this, and we'd also be curious what our dear listeners think of this. But anyway, you're listening to Tool Talk Radio here at News Talk 98.9 The Roar Memphis. We're going to keep the conversation going when we come back.
Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
Gonna paint your wagon, gonna paint it fine. Gonna use oil-based paint, cause the wood is pine.
News Talk 98.9, The Roar of Memphis.
I don't know, man. That guy's a little too perky for the work he's doing, you know. Well, especially when you're working with oil base, Alan, you start to hallucinate after a while.
Well,
That
Maybe he
explains
is
it.
hallucinating.
yeah.
Anyway, welcome back to Tool Talk Radio, coming to you from the Brown Refrigeration Studios. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning. Here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass.
I need a little oil-based paint to be able to get through this show.
Thank you,
guys.
brother. You can call or text us at the Big M Roofing and Remodeling Hotline at 901-683-0989. And we invite you to go to Tool Talk Radio's Facebook page and chime in on the action. I'm sad to say, Alan, we're getting pretty good mileage out of our must-have item of the week.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody's given me a like on the video I posted about building Wrigley Field.
See, no one cares about the Cubs.
I'm just kind of letting you know about that, Joe.
I
so.
guess
You're in Cardinals territory, too.
I know. Well, I know. Hey, I do meet a lot of Cubs fans here in Memphis. I will say that in fairness.
What, a lot as in 3?
In our great moments in building history, I'm ignoring Max. We're discussing Wrigley Field, not because I'm just a diehard, lifelong Cubs fan, even though I was really mad at them in 2021, and it took me a year or two to even get to where I would forgive
It
them.
was so peaceful.
I don't really
know.
forgive them, but it's kind of like in the Bible where it says, "To whom shall I go? What am I going to do? Leave them and go root for the Yankees or something?" I mean, you know. Or the Astros. Give me a break. I'm not going to do that. So anyway, now that I've offended,
Now that you've ticked off at least 2 more cities. Yeah.
well, we've talked
So
about.
we're making enemies with nature and baseball fans.
Yeah,
I love it.
We were talking about Wrigley Field from the point of view of several angles, because it's not just okay. There's several factors at work here that really do relate to your home and to even real estate and everything in terms of okay. You know, Wrigley Field is in a really nice part. For a ballpark, it's in a really great part of the city. It's in the north side by the lake, which creates. I mean, you can actually from the upper decks you can see the lake, Alan. You
Right.
know, but it creates a nice wind, and plus lakes are desirable places to live. People like to live by a lake, so it's always been it's a popular neighborhood. However, it started off as a very basic structure that they've added to, and I guess part of it for me, Alan, is just the notion of it wasn't just built right out of the gate, this iconic structure. It started off as a basic ballpark, but the fundamentals of it were good, and then they just built on it. And I bet you there's a lot of other structures, maybe people's homes have a similar quality where it's like the skeleton is good, and then you build on that. You know?
Well, we've got a spot here in the middle of Memphis called Victoria Village, in which we have a number of homes that are from the Victorian era. Mm-hmm. And as I got a friend working on a house right now, and I'm very fond of telling her constantly, there's no law against overbuilding.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what do I mean by that? So let's say we have a standard these days that says you got to put studs on 16-inch centers. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, does that mean you can't stick another one in there because you want to hang something heavy on a wall?
Strengthen it. Oh, okay.
You can go ahead and put one right in the middle if you want. There is no law against overbuilding. Now, when certain structures came along, the Wrigley Field is an excellent example because it's 1914, and the architect did not whip out his trusty calculator and decide how much weight 14,000 people were.
You don't think so?
He sat down with a pencil and paper and figured out.
I was going to say he had to calculate.
He didn't have a calculator.
Right. Okay.
Back then they had
He had an abacus.
they had they had a crank calculating machine.
Yeah.
That helped rectify the numbers. But keep in mind, this is pre-computers, and 14,000 people weigh a lot.
Sure.
Not only that, but modern 14,000 people.
Yeah. No
we
kidding.
weigh a lot more because that's about 28,000 people in 1914 people.
Then when you fill them with beer and hot dogs, they get even heavier.
Well, and welcome to the magnitude of what you have to think about while you're working on a structure. Why is the kitchen not carpeted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to spill food all over.
Bingo. You don't want to be cleaning up spills and stuff everywhere. So here in 1914, 15, 16, 17, they start building this thing, And they're actually having to guess and allocate how much do these people weigh? What are they going to be doing here while they're here? And then the big thing
Hopefully
is,
they'll be cheering and stomping their feet. And
yeah, and the big thing is, what are we going to do after they're gone?
Yeah.
All
Clean
right,
up.
well, exactly. So like a movie theater is designed at an angle because that way everybody can see the screen nicely. Wrigley Field is designed a certain way to give as many people as possible the best possible view. And they're also designed to, we got to clean this mess up, and we have to make allocation for what all these people are doing to it while they're here.
Okay.
Because it's a really easy thing to forget that soda or carbonated beverages are corrosive.
Oh, yeah. We've seen that experiment where you stick a nail inside of a can
well-
of Coke in it. Yeah.
Well, these are things that you have to think about when you're working on these type of structures. So to tie this directly into home improvement, you have gone out and you've called one of our lovely real estate agents, and you have now found a beautiful turn-of-the-century home.
Mm-hmm.
There are several here in all up and down the Mississippi River. If you go down to Vicksburg, you can find a lot of turn-of-the-century homes. Well, the first thing you got to start asking yourself was, who, what, when, where, and why was this built? What room was designed to handle the sitting room? Is it on a foundation? And is it on a raised foundation? How do I restore this? What kind of materials can I use to restore this? And what do I want to keep?
Well, I think maybe I'm not. Okay, part of what I think you're having to do, what you're approaching here, Allan, is also with Wrigley Field, you have a different challenge. You have to keep, they're playing baseball
Right.
6-7 months out of the year. You have literally 5 months out of the year to do repairs, and you're dealing with Chicago winters. And
Right. So you don't have 5
there's a lot
months.
of challenges that are posted, when you're talking about not only doing the additions, but also just the maintenance and everything.
Right.
Which is easy to see why they can fall into disrepair.
And I imagine that Wrigley Field isn't always going to be empty, because even when sports season is done, I imagine it acts more like a museum than a baseball park.
Well, these days you can take tours and everything. But back in the day, they were using. Well, they one time, Max, they set up in 1944. They set up a ski jump competition in there.
There you go.
You were going down from the top of the I don't know how they did this. I wouldn't. I mean, like from the top of the scoreboard to the bottom, and they were. That sounds like a death trap to me, but whatever. So yeah, they want to take advantage and use it and make money as often as they can. So
my direct tie for preserving a facility like Wrigley Field ties a lot into in the case of a lot of cities in the United States, the houses are now reaching that stage where it's not necessarily a new roof, but it's going to be more preservation and restoration.
yeah,
My query is, then this is just something that I was kind of thinking about, is in the topic of restoration, I feel it's more important to preserve the spirit of what a particular structure represents, even if you have to make modern, reconstructions and everything. And so, in your opinion, Joe, what sort of structures or what sort of aspects of Wrigley Field, yeah, you can go ahead.
Funny you should say that, Max. That's very interesting that you said that, because that's what they've been faced with throughout their history. It's like, okay, there is a vibe here. Yeah.
It makes me think of your argument about how much you hate Soldier Field modern times, because you just destroyed the history behind it.
Oh, we'll get onto my Soldier Field. Yeah, they did it wrong. They did restoration wrong over there at Soldier Field. But anyway, the thing about it, Max, here's what I would say. One of the things that's very noteworthy are these giant I-beams that run across this. They run around the stadium, supporting like the upper decks and everything. So if you're in the stands, of course, I always sit in the bleachers. I'm a bleacher bum. But anyway, if you're in the stands, you look up and there are these massive I-beams, and also they have I-beams in the actual stand going, holding them up. Which, Allan, they create a lot of obstacle. There's some seats in Wrigley Field you don't ever want to sit in because you're going to be looking you have an obstructed
Dead
view.
in an
because
I-beam,
There's
right.
no changing it now because that's the way the stadium was designed, So,
Right.
but in the modern stadiums, they don't do that. But anyway, you notice the I-beams and you notice a lot of concrete. That's sort of the reality of it. But also brick is a very, and it's very nice looking brick, the brick element. So it looks, for all intents and purposes, like brick, concrete, and then it's warmed by the grass and the ivy. And but good luck changing out all the I-beams and stuff in 5 months when so they've had to do a lot, and there was no way that you're going to go, well, this modern, the modern carbon fiber or something, we could stick a column here and fix it. That's not going to be allowed. It has to fit with the aesthetics. So there's just a lot of challenges, which is also why these improvements take place over the course of years. They can't say, well, we're going to come in and gut everything and whatever, because they got literally maybe 4 or 5 months to work with in difficult weather and stuff like that.
Right.
So, but in preserving the spirit, they've done a good job of that. I don't think there's there's we've seen it. We've seen times where somebody might take an older structure and they just totally change the character of it and they more or less ruin it. I mean, we've seen that in houses around here, right, Allan?
It also makes me think of like Star Wars and everything. The fact that George Lucas kind of edited his original work.
Gosh, Max is really triggering a lot. Yeah, that's another debate for Geek Tank. But yeah, you're right. But I would say you really have to just maybe that's what Wrigley Field has done well, because I think a lot of other stadiums, like I believe Yankee Stadium, got into trouble because structurally it was falling apart. But I also think the neighborhood kind of went downhill, right? I don't remember why they tore Yankee Stadium down.
I didn't investigate that too much, but looking at this one, again, you got to look at the structure, got to look at the purpose, economic life.
Right.
The other thing that really weighs in is everybody's like, well, you ruined it because you changed the lights. You ruined it because you did this. You ruined it. Well, folks, you still got to bring it into and up to code and safety in whatever era you're in.
Allan, that kind of actually brings me to an important debate where it's like, when does preserving the spirit become the toxic legacy thinking?
Oh, very good. That's a good point, Max, because I was in the middle of that. In 1988, they finally put lights in, and they finally had night games at Wrigley Field. There was a time where the old timers were like, Wrigley Field should not have lights or whatever, and they actually demonstrated the disadvantage that gave the players, because let's suppose you're flying in from Los Angeles back to Chicago. Well, all of your games are during the daytime. You might have got 3 hours of sleep, and now you got to go play another game, and it put you at a big disadvantage. Plus, most people work during the day, and night games are just a reality of the world. And actually, there's fewer things more beautiful than seeing Wrigley Field at night. So that debate, I'm glad we're behind those, but that's more of the legacy thinking that I think Max is talking about.
That makes me think, going back to philosophy, there's a Stoic philosophy where it's like, life is like a cart, and you're the dog tethered to it. You can either choose to run behind the cart or get dragged behind it.
Yeah.
Well, so looking at your home, a lot of decisions when people are looking at buying that quote-unquote unique fixer-upper, of a lot of things start coming into play that I think Wrigley Field has done a good job of laying out for us. Look at the structure. Why do you want to buy this? All right, that's usually the big question.
What is the spirit of your home?
Yeah, why did you buy this?
Right.
Are you looking at this from the potential of, as soon as I'm done with the dozer, I can build a nice house?
Yeah.
Or are you looking at it going, this has got charm, it's got character, of what about that charm and character do you want to preserve? And what is the best way of going about that? Because let's say, because a lot of houses in Memphis have got upper decks.
Right.
And these upper decks were built in the 40s. And now they're leaky messes causing problems. But the solution could be the replacement of a lot of the materials with modern materials that would do a much, much better job of water management and still preserve the deck.
Yeah.
So, the trick is look at these things, and you're going to have an eye towards your economics always, because, nothing, we can never say money is no object.
No, but now that you're saying this, Allan, I think maybe the way to close this out is just, there's a spirit in every structure. Sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad. Maybe I've seen some of your, I've seen some of the places you hang out, Allan. But no, but
there are places deeply deserving a bulldozer.
I say everybody should look at their home and see what is the spirit of this home, and maybe you build on the parts that really accentuate it, and then maybe you trim out the parts that aren't. Like, I was not at all disappointed to get rid of the ugly yellow tile in my bathroom from the 1950s. However, I'm not going to just. So I don't.
But your kitchen is now functional and warm and safe.
Right.
Because your kitchen was unsafe.
Right. I guess that's something to think about, because, we can't spend the whole show talking about Wrigley Field, but I think there's bigger dynamics at play. And, Max, would you say this is a ship of Theseus? I mean, there's...
I would certainly say so, in terms of, because I hadn't thought about the fact that it was under continuous construction for over 100 years. But I suppose you could say it is very well a ship of Theseus.
And I guess in the bigger term, all of our homes should be a ship of Theseus, right?
Well, absolutely. You got a lot of projects that should constantly be ongoing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And like I said, feel free to weigh in any day of the week. I mean, you can always get in touch with us. And you can even leave text messages 24 hours a day. You can send us pictures at the Big M Roofing and Remodeling Hotline, 901-683-0989. And feel free to weigh in during the week with your questions or comments at the Tool Talk Radio Facebook page. So, hey, Allan, we got a couple more things to get to. But before we get to any of that, what's going on with darkoakmedia.com?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because we've got a lot going on. First thing I'd like to say is welcome to the Philippines for joining the Tool Talk Radio listening family.
Nice.
We noticed we had quite a few international hits of, again, our fastest growing audiences in Norway.
Interesting.
So I'm going to have to learn how to say hello in Norwegian.
I guess we got to look up some Norwegian architecture to showcase. So,
how to deal with ice and snow. Just a lot going on. And, of course, our Cooking in the Tiny Kitchen show has been a absolute runaway blast. So you too can learn how to make spaghetti and meatballs and bison chili and all kinds of other things in a humorous way in a really small kitchen.
Okay.
Hello in Norwegian is hallo.
Oh, there you go. That's easy.
How do you spell that?
Hallo.
Okay. All right.
That'll work.
Easy enough. Hello. Okay.
So what's going on with
Sound
you,
like
Joe?
a Seinfeld character. Okay, darkoakmedia.com. And, of course, if you're a content creator and you have some content that doesn't involve food, which would be a nice change, get in touch with Allan, and he may put you on the air. You never know.
Anything could happen.
So for me, Allan, one nice thing is actually among other things, I'm actually going to be doing some of my wood turnings. I got somebody that's hired me to do some of that. And also, I don't really mention this enough, but I do have a laser engraver that sometimes people have need of, and I've got somebody that I'm going to be doing some laser engraving work for. Fundamentally, though, however, if you've got any projects for the outside of your home, that's kind of my wheelhouse. And you know what's interesting, Allan? We've talked about the lumber drama. I know you're in and out of the big box store every day, like yep. We remember the ghost town of you go in during 2020 and 2021, and it was a crapshoot if you could even find a fence board. Remember those empty racks of lumber and everything? Well, these days, man, they have so much lumber, it's spilling out into the parking lot. You've seen that.
All of those orders have been filled.
Because you talked about how that. So what I'm getting now is people going, okay, lumber's back. We're good to go, because that's what I deal with. I like outside woodworking projects like decks or patio covers or screened-in porches. As a matter of fact, I have a screened-in porch that somebody wants me to make for them. But I'm also looking into these unique woodworking projects like this catio to accommodate like 12 or 13 cats.
Oh, yeah. Can't wait.
For the cat lady, anyway. But if you've got any interesting woodworking projects that you need done, I encourage you to get in touch with me. One thing I don't showcase enough on this show, Allan, they probably think, well, he's got this radio show. He's probably really expensive because he's whatever. He's got I don't know what their preconceptions are, but the thing is, I have a very low overhead. I operate with a very streamlined operation. So my prices, I almost always undercut people, even though you're getting top quality workmanship.
Well,
so just keep that in mind, folks. That's another a good factor. But anyway, you can get in touch with me directly at 901-921-7105, or you can go to my website, thorshomes.com. Well, Allan, enough positivity. Let's close things out here.
Oh, the humanity.
Gosh, I just wonder if you're wearing headphones, what does that sound like?
You get the full experience.
Max, you're blowing out eardrums all over the place. But how was your week? If you're new to Tool Talk Radio, we always like to check in with Allan because he does. I just told you I do woodworking. My job's pretty straightforward every week. However, Allan is in a commercial setting, dealing with state regulations, dealing with multiple employees, and you never know where he's going to go or what he's going to do. So we always check in and find out what happens. So
been a little mixed bag. So we'll start off with 2 follow-ups.
Okay.
Of a few weeks ago, we talked about during all the massive heavy rain.
Serious rain.
I know it's been raining constantly since then, but it hasn't been. That
was torrential rain.
Yeah, that was pretty serious. One of the facilities we were looking at kept getting water in through the walls, and we ended up doing some very unattractive landscaping. Translation, grab a shovel and start digging.
Yeah, this is not finesse work.
This was
divert the water at all
costs. This was kiss that bush goodbye. Sorry.
Well, why didn't you get out the excavator, Allan?
You shouldn't have put it there to start with. It's biting the dust.
Okay.
The good news is all these weeks later, the trenching that we did around the home and through the landscaping has been 100% successful.
Yeah, you said you had a structure where everything was mounded in a way where it was pushing water into the building.
Yeah.
When you were saying trenches and everything, I'm just picturing like World War I, but with like squirrels inside it.
All right, that was not that far off, let me tell you. We were just digging through bush roots and everything forever.
See, I'm picturing Bill Murray from Caddyshack, where Allan's, instead of battling gophers, he's battling the water.
Oh, well, it's close. Number 2 was the kitchen that was getting water under the tiles.
Oh, that's fun.
Talking with a friend of mine at one of the tile shops, he goes, well, let's think of this a different way.
Okay.
He goes, well, depending upon their lifestyle, what they're doing in this kitchen, he goes, quit thinking of it as a kitchen and a floor and think of it more as a shower.
I think the title for this segment is you're remodeling as a wash.
Yes.
Okay.
So
that's the thumbnail. Okay.
The big one on this was, stop thinking of it as like the floor in the living room and think of this area in the kitchen for these people as more like the floor of a shower.
So you go to town and really
go in with the flexible thin set and all of that you would use in a shower, which is much more waterproof and much exactly
right.
And we wrapped that up a couple of days ago, and it is fabulous. And my last little point that I'm going to be dealing with today is it's been raining a lot. We've had a lot of wind.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of tree limbs down.
I've noticed that. Yeah.
I am going to throw out the warning. If you do not know what you're doing, please do not mess with this on your own. Widowmakers are called widowmakers for a reason. These big old branches that have broken off and are hanging up in the tree.
Yeah.
These things will do a bad thing.
And they'll knock the ladder out from under you.
Oh, yes, they will.
So, all right. Well, actually, it sounds like it was a triumphant week in Allan's week.
It was a good week.
All right, cool. Well, we hope you have a good week coming up, and we hope you tune in next week. But Allan, it's time to get out of here. So on behalf of my buddy Allan Gilbreth and our pal Max over there behind the glass, I'm Joe Thorderson. Thanks for listening to Tool Talk Radio, and we'll see you next week.